collaboration with the Cyprus Mail. This is the Cyprus News Digest with Rosie Charalambous.
Coming up on the programme this week, we'll talk to the developer of a new app that helps you find people who want to do the same things as you.
Basically, activity-based search for people around you. So whatever you want to do, for example, you want to go for movies, you want to go for drinks, you want to go and volunteer, you can use the app for this to find people around you who also want to do the same thing.
The investment plan for Europe was discussed in Nicosia earlier this week.
Anybody can apply for advice, technical assistance and financial advice. Municipalities, member states, corporates, regulatory companies.
The European Investment Bank is supporting strategic investments.
We will continue to finance these projects on terms which are very beneficial for the Cyprus economy because the interest rates are favorable and they are passed on to the final beneficiaries.
And we'll hear about the University of Cyprus Biobank.
In our biobank, we do have thousands of samples from patients with these disorders. We also host samples from other colleagues who have been working on other conditions such as dementias.
Joining us on the programme this week is Laura Sagan. She's written an app called Be Here, and it aims to help people who volunteer. Well, it aims to help quite a lot of people, actually. Laura, what is the idea behind Be Here?
Well, the idea behind the app is basically activity-based search for people around you. So whatever you want to do, for example, you want to go for movies, you want to go for drinks, you want to go and volunteer, you can use the app for this to find people around you who also want to do the same thing. So it's actually started with me being in Japan and feeling a little bit lonely because I love solo traveling, but in Japan it just felt a little bit out of place. And I was like, oh, wouldn't it be amazing to have an app like this, using which I can find people around me who'd also like to do the same thing as me. And I tried looking for anything like that. I couldn't quite find an app like this. And I was like, okay. And I kind of started jotting down the ideas. At that time, I was working in a corporate job. So I had to work weekends and evenings on this. At that time, what was my hobby. And eventually, I realized that's actually something that I'd like to pursue full time. So I ended up quitting my job. And I used to be a management consultant in the city of London. I've quit my job and I started working at it full time. And as the idea unfolded, I basically quite recently came to a realization that volunteering is one of the activities. So initially we didn't have volunteering. Volunteering is one of the activities that a lot of people like to do. They care about certain causes, whether it's environment, whether it's animals, but there are no means to find volunteering opportunities. And also when you decide to volunteer on your own, it's kind of difficult to maintain the momentum of like saying, I want to volunteer now. And then a couple of days later, you kind of say, oh, well, I have my life getting on the way. But if you find someone to do it with, then it becomes more fun. So this is the idea behind the app.
How do you write an app? I mean, where did you learn that skill?
Well, actually, it's a little bit of a cheat. So when I was coming up with an idea, I first started with a piece of paper, how it's going to look like, the wireframes, the screens. And then I'm not a coder, so I only know very basic HTML5. But basically, I found a software online that you can use pretty much like PowerPoint, except that there were certain buttons that are clickable on it, and build a prototype based on my pencil drawings. And then going forward, I realized I have two choices. Either I have to learn a coding language myself, or I find someone who I can hopefully later on co-found this and build this together. So I just realized it's not really realistic to build something like this and learn the language so fast, especially given that I was working full time. So I decided to go with the second option. So I sent a shout out on my Facebook, and I've been talking to my friends about it, how much I need a coder, how much I need a developer. And then finally, until my friend asked his friend, and then his friend asked his friend, that I came across my technical co-founder, James. We've worked together for a few months until we realized actually we're a very good fit and working on this together as co-founding this app.
So the app is already available, I think, for iPhone.
It is, yes. So you can download it on the App Store right now if you have an iPhone. Android release, and it's quite ironic because I'm actually an Android user myself. So I had to borrow a friend's iPhone to be able to use my own app. But it's just easier to develop on iOS, which is why we went with it. But Android release is scheduled for May. So hopefully in that time, majority of the people will be able to use this.
And will you develop it further? I mean, you're talking about people just sort of, downloading the app and then sending a message out. When they do, does it go to anybody else who's got the app who happens to be in the area? I mean, you don't want to receive a message from Cyprus if you're in Japan.
Exactly. So that's why it is a location-driven app. So you set your own radius as far or as little as you want. So if you live in a densely populated area such as London, such as Tokyo, your radius is probably going to be about maybe 2 miles. You want to get messages to people from 2 miles around.
Whereas if it's in Cyprus, you probably set it for, 50 or 60 because people might pop up from Limassol.
Exactly. So it's it depends where you are. So it's kind of, the control is in your hands who you want to meet. But the matching is based on the location and on the activity that you like doing. So if you're interested in going for a meal, you're not going to get notifications from someone who's looking for a buddy to go to volunteer, for example. So
and how many different topics, if you like, are there? And I presume you'll add more.
Yes. So right now we have 11 activities. So 12 with anything. Anything basically selects all activities out there. Right now it's just core activities. So food, drink, sports, things like that. So we don't specify which sports that you'd like to play. Would you like to play badminton? Would you like to play football, tennis? But going forward, as we start growing our user base, we will add subcategories. So you'd be able to find exactly the people that want to do exact same thing, not just in the same topic, in the same kind of area, but exact thing. For example, if you want to go for cocktails, you don't want to go to a pub for cocktails, you want to go to a fancy bar, you can go and do that. For volunteering specifically, though, what we're looking to add is volunteering for specific causes. So instead of adding, you can hardly do subcategories of volunteering. So our subcategories would be the causes that you care about. So do you care, as I mentioned, you care about the environment, you care about some social agendas. So you'd be able to do this.
And where's it available? Remind us again.
It's available in London. Well, it's with a caveat to anyone in the world can download it. So it's available on the App Store. So if you're an App Store, you can just go ahead and download it. But we just rolled out in London, so we're growing our user base in London at the moment. And so it happened that I'm here in Cyprus to test this specific volunteering activity. So hopefully we'll grow our user base in Cyprus as well.
And that is Laura Sagan talking about Be Here. Look for it in the App Store.
You can subscribe to the Cyprus News Digest on iTunes for free and get the program downloaded to your phone or tablet so you can listen anytime, anywhere.
The investment plan for Europe was discussed earlier this week at EU House in Nicosia. One of the speakers talking about delivering on the European Fund for Strategic Investments, that's the EFSI, was Flavia Palanza. She's Director for Central and South East Europe at the European Investment Bank. Flavia, what actually were you telling people today and how will this benefit Cyprus?
I was explaining what the investment plan for Europe is and what the EIB role in the investment plan for Europe is. The investment plan has 3 pillars: enhancing investment in strategic and higher risk sectors or for higher risk projects, advisory to promoters that want to develop these projects, and a third pillar that is managed by the European Commission on the structural reforms in the countries, how to introduce reforms that would benefit the internal market and the development of investment across countries and of growth.
At the moment, the European Investment Bank has various schemes operating in Cyprus which are on a pretty good rate for us. We're a small country. You've mentioned the financial problems that we've got. The Juncker plan is going to make all this investment more expensive for us, isn't it?
No, the Juncker plan targets a specific type of investment. Indeed, we have a lot of investments in Cyprus now. Our lending is about 200 million per annum already in investment for infrastructure, investment for SMEs, and we will continue to finance these projects on terms which are very beneficial for the Cyprus economy because the interest rates are favorable and they are passed on to the final beneficiaries. In addition to that, we can do projects belonging to the investment plan for Europe. But these are projects that have a specific risk profile. They're riskier because they can be in an innovative sector, they can be in a sector where the market is not yet sufficiently developed, and that adds a further risk to the promoter. So we can finance this project, which otherwise the other banks would not be financing, or we ourselves would not be financing on our own resources because the risk for us would be too high. EFSI gives us a guarantee which takes part of this risk. But it's a guarantee which comes with a cost. And it is a cost which we have to pass on. So EFSI doesn't mean that we give more cheap funding. We give funding at market price for projects that are of high risk and that could not be financed otherwise.
Is it worth doing those projects at that price if they are high risk? That's something people will ask.
Well, it depends on the returns of those projects. High risk normally entails high return. And if a project provides high returns, both to the project promoter and the collectivity, I think it is worth doing that. Europe wouldn't be where, perhaps not where it is now, but where it was a few years ago if there had not been a lot of investment in innovative projects. And this is what we need to be able to maintain our competitiveness in the long term. We need to invest in innovative products which will enable us to modernize our economy and which will enable us to compete in the global market. And we can only do that not by doing run-of-the-mill investment, but by doing higher risk.
And what has been the effect of all the austerity policies on the work of the European Investment Bank? It must be harder now for investors to want to invest.
Well, our role has been a counter-cyclical role throughout. So even when investment was at very low levels back in 2007, we have never dropped our lending because we have substituted ourselves to those lenders, be commercial banks, be the public, the budget, that could not lend for lack of funding or because they could not take the risk, even very moderate risk. So the EIB has substituted itself to them and has helped in its limited way. We are very large, but still, we are small in European scale. So we have tried to help maintain investment levels. We have done since 2010. We have been lending 70 billion per annum or more.
Where does the money come from?
For the capital markets. We finance ourselves exclusively on the capital markets. We are we are the largest multilateral borrower. And because we have a AAA, we can pass on the advantageous terms of our borrowing to our customers.
And what about the non-performing loan problem we have here in Cyprus? How does that impact the work that you're doing? Because you can lend to the banks, but if they're not lending out and they got into trouble for lending to the wrong people with the wrong collateral, so it's a little bit of a chicken and egg situation, isn't it?
Well, Cyprus is making progress in dealing with the NPL issue. It still remains a very serious one. We are aware of that. But this is a problem which the banks have to tackle. The loans which you give to the banks are attached to specific criteria of project viability. And we hope that they will not be impaired. And I must say that so far we have always had good experience with lending to the Cypriot banks. I should also add that the NPLs are much related to real estate lending, and real estate is an area where the EIB does not intervene. So what we have been financing are investment in the real economy. In addition to that, as a backup for us, our loans benefit of a state guarantee, so that should there be, which nobody hopes, but an issue with repayment capabilities of the bank, we have a fallback guarantee on the state. This is a guarantee which we have never used and we hope never to use, but which enables us not to take a country risk for Cyprus, and therefore to be lending at rates that otherwise would be much higher than they are.
And that is Flavia Palanza, Director for Central and South East Europe at the European Investment Bank.
Get in touch with the Cyprus News Digest by emailing cyprusnewsdigest@gmail.com.
Nikos Yambidis is Senior Loan Officer at the European Investment Bank. He spoke in Nicosia earlier this week about the lending opportunities in the EFSI framework and using the European Investment Advisory Hub. Well, first of all, what is the Investment Advisory Hub?
The Investment Advisory Hub is an EIB and European Commission initiative that aims to help promoters of new investments to prepare these projects and these investments so that they would eventually get financing and be implemented. Just to add that the Advisory Hub doesn't work only with potential EFSI projects, but also for non-EFSI projects. And it's all centralized inside the EIB. The Advisory Hub is centralized within the EIB, working equally for EFSI projects and non-EFSI projects. Anybody can apply for advice, technical assistance and financial advice. Municipalities, member states, corporates, regulatory companies. And we hope that this will be able also to help in new investments inside the European Union.
What's the take-up of the advice from Cypriot organisations?
We had a few requests already. I have in mind a request from a municipality that wants to promote more efficient production of electricity using renewable energy sources. So it's the production of the electricity and the efficient use of this energy produced, and we're trying to help them to make their idea more mature. My colleagues are trying to help them make their idea more mature so that eventually it would get financing, and why not also from the EIB. We had another request from possible ICT projects on broadband and infrastructure, which again it's not yet fully mature, and we feel that with the help of the hub we can help them make their idea more mature, maybe with analysis or some advice on financial matters.
So you can help organisations to make their proposals more mature. Do you also, in a sense, point them in the direction of potential investors, or through the EIB, are they likely to apply for funding?
It's unlikely that we would be able to point them towards investors. We, EIB, could finance such projects once they mature, but also under this second pillar of the investment platform for Europe, there is another initiative by the Commission. So this other initiative is not shared, the EIB and the Commission, it's fully by the Commission. It wants to create a project directorate where there all new investments in Europe can be published, can be listed.
So investors can just go online
Exactly.
and have a look if there's anything they fancy.
Exactly. It's not yet up and running, but as I understand, it's more or less there. It needs a few more weeks, and it would be more or less there.
So what's the future outlook for European investment, and how do you feel the responses at the Nicosia conference have been?
No, for sure, the response is very positive. There are a lot of people who want to invest. Of course, they have their concerns, a volatile economic environment still inside the EU, and maybe they need some experience in how to mature ideas so that then international investors and local investors can finance in their projects. But I'm very optimistic that there is a good response.
That is Nikos Yambidis, Senior Loan Officer at the European Investment Bank.
Keep up to date with events in Cyprus and around the world with the Cyprus News Digest.
In 2011, the University of Cyprus inaugurated a biobank. What is a biobank? We're going to find out on this week's Cyprus News Digest. With us is Professor Konstantinos Deltas, who's going to tell us exactly, Konstantinos, what it does.
A biobank is essentially an infrastructure which allows you to archive medical records of patients and healthy volunteers associated with biological material. So you do store biological material in the form of DNA, genetic material in other words, with plasma, serum, urine or tissue biopsies from patients or healthy volunteers associated with some medical information or detailed medical information concerning the medical condition of the donors who participate. We were the first to start it at the University of Cyprus in 2011 after competitive funding from the European Union through the Cyprus Research Promotion Foundation. It was one of the largest research programs in Cyprus. It was a strategic research program with €2 million, which aimed at setting up this first biobank for genetic disorders. And at the same time, the funding allowed for research in the genetics of inherited kidney disorders. The focus of the research of my group at the University of Cyprus, at the Molecular Medicine Research Center, is inherited kidney disorders. So we launched a huge project studying some of the inherited renal diseases that we have in Cyprus. And in our biobank, we do have thousands of samples from patients with these disorders. We also host samples from other colleagues who have been working on other conditions such as dementias and diseases that have to do with the behavior of adolescents and things like that. So we've been pursuing this biobank activity, and hopefully we will be able to upgrade it soon.
When we talk about samples, tissue and so on, how do you actually store those? Because they don't last forever, do they? Unless you have them in exactly the right conditions.
Well, that's the idea of a biobank. We store our samples at minus 80 degrees freezers. So if you store DNA or biological material at these low temperatures, they are safe for a long, long time. I mean, you can have them for decades, if not forever. Other times, depending on the material that you want to store, for example, if you want to keep biopsies, renal or tissue biopsies from cancer tumors, for example, or from a kidney or from a muscle biopsy, then you may choose to keep it in liquid nitrogen, which achieves very low temperatures in the order of minus 190 degrees Celsius. So that's a very low temperature. You keep them under the right conditions in cryo tubes and the similar, so that you preserve this precious biological material for future research for a long time.
So who can access the biobank? Researchers from all over the world? Can they come to you and say, I'm doing this, I need that, and you can give it to them?
Depending on the conditions under which a biobank is created and the constitution that describes how a biobank is created and it functions and operates, access to this biobank may be allowed to many researchers in Cyprus and abroad. They always need to explain why they need to use this material by applying and explaining their project, and they also need to have approval by the Cyprus National Bioethics Committee. no material can be used unless you have approval by the Cyprus National Bioethics Committee.
And of course,
Also,
in this day and age, we've got people so concerned about their data, and a biobank, from what you're saying, has about the most personal data anybody could give anybody. What about data protection and the feelings of the people who you have managed to get samples from?
That's true. Every donor who agrees to give information about their medical condition, personal data, and biological material needs to be informed and sign a consent form. And this consent form is something that has already been approved by the Ethics Committee. It goes without saying that all of this material and information is kept confidential, many times anonymized, or people can have access to it in a codified manner, so that we protect the data. That
You protect the identity, basically.
We protect the identity, either by pure and complete anonymization, or better, through passwords and coding, because many times you need to have a way to associate the data and the results of your research with the actual person. So not everybody has access to this, but you need to have a way, a mechanism through which to reach the actual patient in case you need to see him again or her and ask more things about their medical condition or follow their medical condition for the future.
And if we look to the future, I know you're planning to expand the bank and to include, as you said, many other conditions so that it becomes a centre of excellence, not just in Cyprus, but probably in the region.
The biobank at the University of Cyprus is already a general genetics biobank. We have been collecting and archiving samples from different conditions, although the focus of the research of my group is inherited renal conditions. We've been working on upgrading this biobank, and at the moment we've been we are preparing a new application to the European Commission for more funding in our effort to upgrade our biobank into a center of excellence. The idea for doing this is because the current funding is very limited in Cyprus. Therefore, if we manage to get this grant, hopefully we will be able to serve many more researchers in Cyprus. Our purpose is to serve every researcher or doctor in Cyprus who is interested in using this biobank, who's interested in using the facilities, the infrastructure, and the benefits of having access to a biobank. You see, many times researchers are limited in what they can do because they have no access to biobanked material.
How do you find the people to give samples? Is it through doctors when there are particular conditions that doctors may know you're interested or you've already started a collection for?
Yeah. People know in Cyprus that we have this biobank, but we have many collaborators, yes. So they know, and they send patients through collaborations we maintain with many of them. Therefore, there's a relationship here. There's a collaboration between clinical doctors and researchers like us. And we help each other in reaching potential donors of material, because every research project has one main central purpose: to help the patient. So every patient, in my mind, is encouraged to participate in research projects. And let's say you've been sort of lucky in Cyprus in the sense that very, very few times people refuse participating in research projects when they were invited to.
Which is great news, and it means that the biobank at the University of Cyprus is hopefully set to grow even bigger and even better. That was Professor Konstantinos Veltas from the university. Well, that about wraps up this edition of the Cyprus News Digest. Many thanks for your company. Hope you'll join me next week. Till we meet again, take care and God bless. Bye-bye now.